On the first night they set up house in one of the bunkers along the perimeter, near the Special Forces hutch, and over the next 2 weeks they'd stuck together like a pair of high school studies. It was almost disgusting, Rat said, the way they mooned over each other, always holding hands, always laughing over some private joke. All they needed, he said, were a couple of matching sweaters. But among the medics there was some envy. It was Vietnam, after all, and Mary Ann Bell was an attractive girl. Too wide in the shoulders, maybe, but she had terrific legs, a bubbly personality, a happy smile. The men generally liked her. Out on the volleyball court she wore cut-off blue jeans and a black swimsuit top, which the guys appreciated, and in the evening she liked to dance to music from Rat's portable tape deck. There was a novelty to it. She was good for moral. At times she gave off a kind of come-get-me energy, coy and flirtatious, but apparently it never bothered Mark Fossey. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it, just grinning at her because he was so much in love, and because it was a sort of show that a girl will sometimes put on for her boyfriend's entertainment and education. Though she was young, Rat said Mary Ann Bell was no timid child. She was curious about things. During her first days in country, she liked to roam around the compound asking questions. What exactly was a trip flare? How did Claymore work? What was behind those scary green mountains to the west? Then she'd quit and listen quietly while somebody filled her in. She had a good, quick mind. She paid attention. Often, especially during the hot afternoon, she would spend time with the ARVNs out along the perimeter, picking up little phrases of Vietnamese, learning how to cook rice over a can of sterno, how to eat with her hands. The guys sometimes liked to kid about it. Our own little native, they'd say, but Mary Ann would just smile and stick out her tongue. I'm here, she'd say. I might as well learn something. The war intrigued her, the land too, and the mystery. At the beginning of her second week she began pestering Mark Fossey to take her down to the village at the foot of the hill. In a quiet voice, very patiently, he tried to tell her that it was a bad idea, way too dangerous, but Mary Ann kept after him. She wanted to get a feel for how people lived, what the smells and customs were. It did not impress her that the VC owned the place. Listen, it can't be that bad, she said. They're human beings, aren't they, like everybody else? Fossey nodded. He loved her. And so in the morning Rat Kiley and the two other medics tagged along as security, while Mark and Mary Ann strolled through the ville like a pair of tourists. If the girl was nervous, she didn't show it. She seemed comfortable and entirely at home. The hostile atmosphere did not seem to register. All morning Mary Ann chattered away about how quaint the place was, how she loved the thatched roofs and naked children, the wonderful simplicity of village life. A strange thing to watch, Rat said. The 17-year-old doll in her goddamn culottes, perky and fresh-faced like a cheerleader, visiting the opposing team's locker room. Her pretty blue eyes seemed to glow. She couldn't get enough of it. On their way back up to the compound, she stopped for a swim in the Song Trebong, stripping down to her underwear, showing off her legs while Fossey tried to explain to her about things like ambushes and snipers and the stopping power of an AK-47. The guys, though, were impressed. A real tiger, said Eddie Diamond. D-cup guts, trainer bra brains. She'll learn, somebody said. Eddie Diamond gave solemn nod. There's the scary part. I promise you, this girl will most definitely learn. In parts, at least, it was a funny story, and yet to hear Rat Kiley tell it, you'd almost think it was intended as straight tragedy. He never smiled, not even at the crazy stuff. There was always a dark, far-off look in his eyes, a kind of sadness, as if he were troubled by something sliding beneath the story's surface. Whenever we laughed, I remember he'd sigh and wait it out. But the one thing he could not tolerate was disbelief. He'd get edgy if someone questioned one of the details. She wasn't dumb, he'd stamp. I never said that. Young, that's all, I said. Like you and me. A girl, that's the only difference. And I'll tell you something. It didn't amount to jack. I mean, when we first got here, all of us, we were real young and innocent, full of romantic bullshit. But we learned pretty damn quick. And so did Mary Ann. Rat would peer down at his hands, silent and thoughtful. After a moment his voice would flatten out. You don't believe it, he said. Say, fine with me, but you don't know human nature. You don't know Nam. Then he'd tell us to listen up. A good sharp mind, Rat said. True, she could be silly sometimes, but she picked up on the things fast. At the end of the second week, when 4 casualties came in, Mary Ann wasn't afraid to get her hands bloody. At times, in fact, she sometimes fascinated by it. Not the gore so much, but the adrenaline buzz that went with the job. That quick hot rush in your veins when the chopper settled down and you had to do things fast and right. No time for sorting through options, no thinking at all. You just stuck your hands in and started plugging up holes. She was quiet and steady. She didn't back off from the ugly cases. Over the next day or two, as more casualties trickled in, she learned how to clip an artery and pump up a plastic splint and shoot in morphine. In times of action, her face took on a sudden new composure and almost serene. The fuzzy blue eyes narrowing into a tight, intelligent focus. Mark Fosse would grin at this. He was proud, yes, but also amazed. A different person, it seemed, and he wasn't sure what to make of it. Other things, too. The way she quickly fell into the habits of the bush. No cosmetics, no fingernail filling. She stopped wearing jewelry, cut her hair short, and wrapped it in a dark green bandana. Hygiene became a matter of small consequence. In her second week, Eddie Diamond taught her how to disassemble a M16, how the various parts worked, and from there it was a natural progression to learning how to use the weapon. For hours at a time she plunked away at sea ration cans, a bit unsure of herself, but as it turned out, she had a real knack for it. There was a new confidence in her voice, a new authority in the way she carried herself. In many ways she remained naive and immature, still a kid, but Cleveland Heights now seemed very far away. Once or twice gently, Mark Fosse suggested that it might be time to think about heading home, but Mary Ann laughed and told him to forget it. Everything I want, she said, is right here. She stroked his arm and then kissed him. On one level, things remained the same between them. They slept together, they held hands, and made plans for after the war, but now there was a new imprecision in the way Mary Ann expressed her thoughts on certain subjects. Not necessarily 3 kids, she'd say. Not necessarily a house on Lake Erie. Naturally, we'll still get married, she'd tell him, but it doesn't have to be right away. Maybe travel first. Maybe live together. Just test it out. You know? Mark Fosse would nod at this, even smile and agree, but it made him uncomfortable. He couldn't pin it down. Her body seemed foreign somehow, too stiff in places, too firm where the softness used to be. The bubbliness was gone, the nervous giggling too. When she laughed now, which was rare, it was only when something struck her truly funny. Her voice seemed to reorganize itself at a lower pitch. In the evenings, while the men played cards, she would sometimes fall into long elastic silences, her eyes fixed on the dark, her arms folded, her foot tapping out a coded message against the floor. When Fosse asked about it one evening, Mary Ann looked at him for a long moment and then shrugged. "It's nothing," she said, "really nothing. To tell the truth, I've never been happier in my life. Never. Twice, though, she came in late at night, very late, and then finally she did not come in at all." Rat Kiley heard about it from Fosse himself. Before dawn one morning the kid shook him awake. He was in bad shape. His voice seemed hollow and stuffed up, nasal sounding, as if he had a bad cold. He held the flashlight in his hands, clicking it on and off. "Mary Ann," he whispered, "I can't find her." Rat sat up and rubbed his face. Even in the dim light it was clear that the boy was in trouble. There was dark smudges under his eyes, the frayed edges of somebody who hadn't slept in a while. "Gone," Fosse said. "Rat, listen, she's sleeping with somebody. Last night she didn't even— I don't know what to do." Abruptly then Fosse seemed to collapse. He squatted down, rocking on his heels, still clutching the flashlight. Just a boy, 18 years old, tall and blond, a gifted athlete, a nice kid too, polite and good-hearted, although for the moment none of it seemed to be serving him well. He kept clicking the flashlight on and off. "All right, start at the start," Rat said. "Nice and slow. Sleeping with who?" "I don't know. Who? Eddie Diamond?" "Eddie? Has to be. The guy's always there. Always hanging on her." Rat shook his head. "Man, I don't know. Can't say it strikes a right note now not with Eddie." "Yes, but he's— Easy does it," Rat said. He reached out and tapped the boy's shoulder. "Why not just check some bunks? We got 9 guys, you and me. That's 2, so there's 7 possibilities. Do a quick body count." Fosse hesitated. "But I can't. If she's there, I mean, if she's with somebody—" "Oh, Christ."